but I think we should let the listeners know before we jump into this, spoilers. This is going to be spoilers for the X-Men 97 finale. You have been warned. And Ricky Flex, I thought it was very, very good, right? I give it an 8.5 out of 10. I had some minor, I guess, issues with this finale. I watched it twice. I watched it yesterday, and then I watched it once before recording, and it worked even better for me the second time I watched it. Um, both times it felt like the finale was trying to do a lot. It had a lot to cover, and whether it be the heavy emotional toll of the episode, whether it be Bastion versus everybody, Magneto versus Professor X, Cable with his parents, right? Scott Summer and Jean Grey. Then you have the US government intervention. You throw Cap and Iron Man also in here. It just felt like there was so much for this episode to cover. And I think for the most part, they landed the plane. I think what actually didn't work really was the US government felt like it was kind of shoehorned in. And you have to have like the humans versus mutants perspective here, aside from Bastion as like this human mutant sentinel type figure. That was my big flaw with the episode. But emotional beats, this hit. And that's what this show was so good at, right? Whether it's Magneto and Professor X. Professor X bringing him Magneto back, making him realize who he truly was. Cable, right, getting the final goodbye from his parents. That had me nearly in tears. Like both time I watched this, super effective. Overall, I think this show landed the plane on the finale. I think it's one of the best Disney Plus series in MCU history, and I think it set a great baseline for what the live action X-Men will be. Those are a lot of thoughts at once, Ricky Flicks. What were your sentiments?
Yeah, I'm trying to tackle which thought to go off of because this was a lot. This was not a 30-minute episode. This is the first time they went over the 30-minute mark. This was 42 minutes, and for good reason. They had to close a lot of storylines. They had to land this plane, and it was a big plane with a lot of storylines, a lot of characters, a lot of big themes, and a lot of emotions. Mix in a big bad villain that we only got in the back half of the season, and a lot of action to be going into, a lot of cameos and a lot of different mutants. It was a lot to put in here, and they packed it in pretty well. You're right about a few things. It maybe was a little overstuffed. Maybe we had a couple extra passengers on this plane, but overall, this did hit the emotional beats. I've been not complaining. I've been critical that, you know what, soap opera X-Men, it's kind of what they do. That's kind of not my bag. But in this episode, it did hit all those beats that you were talking about. And the big one, the Jean and Scott to Cable, that's one where it's like, dude, like Jean, like forgive Scott and Jean, like this is not a kid. This is literally a grown ass man. And like it's like, oh, kind of a weird dynamic, but you felt it in this episode. And I actually felt like the emotions coming up like to my eyes. I didn't cry, but I was like, oh my God, this is actually really sentimental.
It was effective.
It was incredibly effective. And I'm trying to think of like what was the best part of this episode. And I would say that would be in that top billing, that top 5 to 3 moments of this episode with the Professor X Magneto. I think that would be the only one that would kind of combat it for me.
Yeah, you know what I thought is something that you brought up. Really good part of this episode. It cemented that Bastion was an awesome villain for this season.
Theo James.
He was badass, dude. And someone that I don't think gets a lot of respect in X-Men lore. To see him, like, first off, like, him transform into this, like, super Omega Sentinel mutant type of figure, I thought was amazing. I think the performance by Theo James was awesome. It felt like he meant everything that was coming out of his mouth. He seemed like, because at times this does still have that vibe of the Saturday morning cartoon. Theo James as Bastion does not feel anything remotely close to a Saturday morning cartoon, right? You took him seriously whenever he was on the screen. And I think there was a great introduction of Bastion, right, with the surprise that he was going to be the big bad alongside Mr. Sinister. But this one cemented he was a formidable foe for the X-Men. He was someone I was just really impressed with, along with the emotional aspect of this show. I will say there is another flaw of this episode, or something I didn't like about it. I know this might be a part of who the X-Men are, right? If you're a mutant, we're going to try and protect you. Okay. And so where Bastion, he is about to be stepped on by one of his Omega Sentinels, right? That is controlled by Beast, right? Trying to stomp him out. And Bastion's holding on for dear life. And then you have Cyclops calling off the dogs, saying, let's try and reason with this guy. And I'm just thinking in the back of my mind, this guy is responsible for millions of deaths on Genosha.
16 million or 17.
And what did we do last episode? We were trying to kill Magneto, right? Wolverine behind, stab him in the back. And now we're showing mercy for this character. Mind-blowing to me. This guy killed your friends, bro. You're really good
asked
friends.
Him to join the team.
That's Scott trying to be Professor X in that moment. But, dude, you just got to end him. He deserves what he's getting. I don't give a shit if he's a mutant or not. That guy deserves to be locked up.
I'm not saying death penalty or something. I'm not getting into that political debate. But what I'm saying is, yes, the X-Men do this where, it's mutants, that's their kind, but they're trying to be mixed in with human civilization and just be one big happy society, right? But also, if you want to do that, there's got to be consequences. There's got to be consequences. And for someone that's commit genocide to the max, it would be the biggest genocide of human history. 17 million. That would be the biggest that we've ever seen. That one act is like anything Magneto's done pales in comparison to what freaking Bastion did here. So this guy could never, this guy should live the rest of his life in a mutant like protected jail.
Yeah, like facility.
Facility.
X-Men
I don't know.
Like X-Men Days of Future Past, Magneto below for killing the person.
Yeah. That's where I agree with you. The X-Men have a flaw just in the comic, like in the group, the team is just, yes, I understand it. This is what they do. This is their thing. Redemption arcs. They all like Logan redemption arc. Like, everyone has a redemption. Magneto redemption arc. But if we want to be any type of realistic, even within a superhero world of unrealism, you gotta just not do that. Especially this is the biggest moment of the season, and we're just saying, oh, you know what? We're just going to call off the docs. No. This is a superhero show. This is action-packed. Bad guys, good guys, evil, good.
Imagine if Magneto witnessed that transpire. I think that would have woke him up. If he was listening, right, as Planet M is hurling towards Earth, he probably heard that.
Yeah,
that would have woke him up. Not Professor X, just the fact that they were going to let Bastion on the team. I mean, for God's sakes, the UN and everybody was freaking out when Magneto was the leader of the X-Men. Imagine if Bastion is all of a sudden hand in hand with Magneto and Professor X. People would be flipping out.
That's where maybe oh, this wasn't like a kid's Saturday cartoon type of show. Maybe we'd get more serious. Maybe we get more real with it. But because this still has those Saturday morning cartoon vibes, we got to be like, hold up, guys, let's give him a chance. Dude, Scott, this guy killed 17 million people. He's already got his chance.
I was looking for a mic drop moment, like a Tony Stark in Civil War, where he killed my mom, he killed my friend, right? Stop, kill him at that time. To me, it was just absurd for him to let him live. But I also get the vibe that you were talking about, this is the Saturday morning cartoon vibe that I wasn't feeling for a lot of this season, because they rushed through some storylines, right? In 30-minute episodes, things are wrapped up very quickly, one-off villains, this is that. That's where I felt in terms of tone, hey, this is for kids.
But yeah, do you understand what I'm trying to say? With throughout this whole season, though, I know you just said that, but I kind of am gonna push back a little bit with the writing and the themes. They're trying to teach you something, like a Saturday morning cartoon. They're trying to teach kids through metaphors and through the writing and through dialogue.
Through obvious writing.
Yeah, and that's one of those things. It's kids you could still even if you're the good guy and you got the bad guy. You could still show some remorse a little bit, or show you know what I'm saying there? It was still saying, hey,
it wasn't as clean. It wasn't clean when they did it here. There's other parts that they did it this season where it was very clean, where it's so obvious what you're trying to do, but also we accept it. There's a lot of times in live action projects that we realize hey, we get it. You're trying to do this and it actually works out. For example, what they did with Morph and Wolverine in this episode, where Morph turns into Jean and says, right, I love you. And that was obviously, that's anyone
Wild.
can understand like what's happening there, but like the balls for Bo DeMeo to like do that and have it obviously mean that Morph loves Wolverine. That's where it's like any person can understand that, but that's a lot for a kid to watch and see like a non-binary person then saying I love you to Wolverine. That's not traditionally what they see probably in kids shows. You know what I'm saying?
So, okay, wait. So yeah, okay, that's what a lot of people are saying online. But when I watch and like I understand what you're saying. I've seen that and I understand it. But for me, I thought Morph was just being like, "Hey, Logan's dying. He needs to hear Jean's voice."
No, no, that's not what happened.
I'm just saying.
Odemayo said this. He
So
said it
what?
was intentional. He said that's like something where would you see that if that was a Saturday morning cartoon? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe not. Definitely not when we were growing up.
Definitely not. No, definitely not. But all right. But back to the show overall. Like, I think this episode did a good job, like balancing those emotional parts with like this was action packed. This is pretty well done as well from an action sequence standpoint, especially coming off of the penultimate episode, which I know we didn't get to talk about. But this was pretty good for again 42 minutes coming off this is a 3-part finale, and Bastion having to level up literally with Cable's arm, and it packed a punch.
Bro, the action sequences in this episode are unbelievable. They're on par with the best that we've gotten so like throughout this entire season, and they've been spectacular. The moment where Bastion leveled up, you're right. That's when he like transformed into like this super sentinel, like Omega we're talking about. Him ripping off Cable's arm and beat the shit out of Cable with it. That was like, holy crap. Like Cable like looks like a little
Little
bitch.
boy.
Like he looks like a little boy there. And then after that moment, like having uh the Phoenix come out from Jean Grey, right? You know this is like a moment that tells you how powerful Bastion is. We need the Phoenix to come out, and guess what? That's not even enough, right, to save us. Like obviously, you have this moment where it ruins like the ultimate plan of Bastion, but still he goes up to Planet M, and then all hell ensues up top. But I think who has the best action sequences consistently in X-Men 97 is actually Rogue. Rogue is amazing in these action sequences. They always want to zoom in so intently on her face, and so she's so angry. They zoom in on her face like she is like an Oscar-nominated actor. You know, where it's like we have to capture what she's feeling. You know, that's what like it feels every time she does an action sequence. It's slow mo. The animation's crystal clear, and there's tears swiping from her face, and then she's like, "Remember me," and then takes out Bastion. I was like, damn, like why is every Rogue scene hitting the hardest in terms of action sequences? Did you feel that at all?
Rogue has risen up my X-Men leaderboard or power
she's
rankings
awesome.
after this
Stock
season.
up.
Yeah, very stock up. And I know she had the one, I think it was episode 7, I believe, with Trask, and then like the drop on the roof and all that crazy. And then also episode 8 with Magneto, going with Magneto and not staying with the X-Men. So she was, she was on my naughty list for the back half of the season. And also episode 5, remember, and on Genosha, when she went with Magneto dancing in front of Gambit. So her actions, like actions speak louder than words. She was not in my go-to list.
She's not in your good graces.
Good grace is a better way to say it. Thank you. But yeah, she's absolutely electric when she's on screen. To say it again, she packs a freaking punch, and she's a total badass. And I'm just trying to think throughout the rest of this season who I'd prefer, or any other better action sequences. I would say Gambit on Genosha was great, and Magneto as well. Logan and Nightcrawler. Yep, exactly. In episode 8, Loki Scott, when he takes off the goggles and just goes a spray for like that 5 seconds. That was kind of sick. But those would be like my favorite like action sequences throughout the season. Besides the first 2 episodes, which kind of, they're so distant now. But when the whole team first fights together, that was pretty cool with the Scott Summers superhero drop.
Episode 1, Scott, definitely some of the best action sequences. Gambit and Wolverine, also I believe episode 1 together with Gambit absorbing Wolverine's like or is it Wolverine absorbing Gambit's power, whatever it may be. Gambit absorbing Wolverine and then like exerting power over the Sentinel. I think you're talking about best moments of the episode. Like you talked about Professor X and Magneto, right? Pulling him out from underwater. And you talked about Cable with his parents. And I think honestly, it's like a rogue action sequence. Like that was absolutely phenomenal. Then like sequencing with Scott, like going absolutely ballistic with him versus Bastion, him going all out, pushing Bastion to the wall. Yeah, so I agree with you there. Something I was curious about too, we brought up Wolverine. When I first watched it, I didn't say to myself, I miss Wolverine. But the second time I watched it, I was just saying to myself, it would be nice if we had him here. And it felt like Bo DeMeo, the showrunner, was picking and choosing his spots with Wolverine, but they were few and far between. And when they really went all out, it was like, okay, you got your moment with Nightcrawler and Wolverine inside the X Mansion, and you got your iconic comic book reference with him at the end of the penultimate episode. But what was your thoughts on not having Wolverine involved in this episode whatsoever, aside from the morph moment?
Well, Bo DeMeo also said like how, past 20 years, the X-Men have been like all X-Men IP has been around Wolverine, Logan, and Hugh Jackman, really. So he literally said like, yeah, this is going to be focused on the X-Men and the team, and Wolverine's more of a supporting character. And I think that was smart. And because he still had him, still a prominent character, but this is back to what we've been talking about. The X-Men are a family, and this is why the X-Men are different than everything else related to Marvel. The only thing that's comparable really is the Fantastic Four, and still not to the same level as the X-Men. So yes, I think you're absolutely right. I would just also say that back to the point when Scott was like the Bastion, yo, you want to join us? That would be the moment Logan's like, nah, that ain't happening, Scott. Like he would not.
That was pretty good. That was pretty good.
He wouldn't let that fly. So that's where like the only time I was like, damn, we kind of would have missed him, because in all honesty, Logan would not be touching Bastion. Like Nightcrawler, do you recognize Nightcrawler literally was just praying with Xavier and Magneto in the ship while the fight was going on, really, because he couldn't do shit. Like, imagine Logan trying to do it.
Nightcrawler had some good moments against Bastion, though.
Yeah, I know, but then he gave up after a bit. Like,
he's like, well, yeah, there's only so much he can do. Like, Nightcrawler is a great role player. He's not a star of the show, right? He's like, Logan can steal the show. Like, Logan can hold his own at least, especially with his healing abilities and his strength and his claws and everything. Like, Nightcrawler is just like, I'm gonna bamf you to death, and then like, if I don't have someone else to hit you on the other side, what else am I here for? I don't know what else.
But like, you're right. But Bo DeMeo also said like, oh, watch these 6 episodes from the 90s. The original animated show before you watch this trilogy of finales, and I did do that, and I'm glad I did. And like, I don't think you didn't have to, but I just did because I had time, and I really wanted to get the most out of this season that I really enjoyed. And the Wolverine penultimate, right before he puts his claw into Magneto, he was like, the brave are always the first to die. What a line, and that was a callback to one of the episodes that Bo DeMeo recommended you to watch, and Magneto said it in that one of those episodes, The Final Decision. So it was like, oh, not only was that a sick line, but it was like, holy crap, like that's a good callback. And then obviously the iconic, Logan gets his adamantium or whatever, the rare metal, out of him, an iconic comic book
panel.
Yeah.
To have Bo DeMeo, he's very online. He's very much on Twitter, engaging with fans, despite him not returning to the show past season 2, because season 2 is pretty much already done, right? But he's been telling people what to watch, right, leading up to it, and it just makes me kind of sad because like him not being a part of like the future Disney like X-Men projects, at least for now. Who knows if they pull like a James Gunn or whatever. We don't know exactly what he did to get thrown off like X-Men 97, but it's clear that the show is kind of a smash hit, and it's clear that this guy cares about the source material, whether he cares about the comic books, but clearly cares about actually the original X-Men animated series. And it seems like people love this rendition of the X-Men and people are falling in love with it, way more so than the most recent live action X-Men movies that we got with Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix. Like those.
Apocalypse.
And so now I think if you had someone like Bo DeMeo, you need someone who cares about the source material as much as he does, right? To incorporate what we're going to see in the live action X-Men, right? Where there's a lot of love shown to all of the different characters. It's not just about Wolverine, all right? And it has storytelling that I think is accessible for everybody, right? And it has a lot of that emotionality where we did care about the characters. I literally did not think until after I saw it, like, I miss Logan this episode, right? I commend the writers for doing that. Like, you think X-Men, you think Wolverine and Professor X. And I didn't find myself saying, where is Wolverine? How can he not heal for this? This is the biggest episode. Where the hell is this guy? You know, I kept saying Rogue had the best action sequences. Did we say that in the the Bryan Singer trilogy? Absolutely not. I was sick of Rogue. I hated Rogue there. You know, Scott Summers, someone that I wanted to like so bad in the Bryan Singer trilogy, but they made him really lame. Guess what? He was freaking awesome in this. You know, I think it just builds up excitement and how like we should treat the characters in live action. It gives us that baseline like we're talking about here. Ricky Flex, I did also want to say this was very reminiscent of X-Men, of the MCU with the amount of cameos that happened. And I just want to list a bunch of them that happened, if you don't mind. And if I missed something, you will let me know. So cameos that we saw that also, I will say, did not take away from the X-Men, which I liked. It answers that question. What are the Avengers doing? What is Spider-Man doing? What is Daredevil doing when all this shit is happening? Like, what's happening? So here's people we saw. Daredevil.
Biggest one.
Daredevil, yes. Who has obviously we have the reincorporation of Daredevil in the MCU. We saw him in She-Hulk. We saw him in
No Way Home.
Purple Suit. What's her? Echo. And we saw him in No Way Home. And cameo galore. So Daredevil back here. And who's Daredevil with? Cloak and Dagger. Cloak and Dagger. When have we seen them in an MCU project? Never. This one, low-key, was my favorite. Mary Jane. Mary Jane we got after the finale of the Spider-Man animated series from the 90s. She was stuck in a vortex and she was being sent to a different multiverse. And this is the first time we've seen her since.
But, okay, wait, time out. Can we confirm that's the same?
No.
That did not look the same animation.
Well, yeah, I don't know.
Because Peter Parker was with her and Flash.
I like seeing Peter Parker as Peter Parker, not Spider-Man. I like seeing him.
Yeah, I like that too.
That was good.
But you know what I'm saying, though? Like, that's not I don't think that's the same animated, like, I don't think that's, because the animation was just so different.
Mary Jane, who else is? So a different universe, Mary Jane? Like, what do you mean?
Yeah. I don't think they're overlapping.
I don't know. It looks like we're going to have a Spider-Man animated series revival, just like X-Men 97 to find out. Flash Thompson, also in the background there. Mr. Fantastic, Morph at it again. So Morph has played Quicksilver. Morph has played the Hulk. Morph has played Mr. Fantastic, right? In that stretchy moment that ended up not paying off for him. Okay, who else do we have? Black Panther. Not T'Challa, but we had T'Chaka, which makes sense because this is the 90s. All right, that makes sense. Iron Man with Captain America. Iron Man did not have a single quote here. It was very much like what we saw with Wolverine not having much to do in this series. It felt like very, like, also it almost mirrors it, you know, where it's like, okay, Iron Man's going to be in this, but he isn't going to say a single word. You know, it's just we'll have him show up, and it's a tribute to the animated series. And also he was in Spider-Man animated series for a couple episodes, along with Daredevil. Captain America, second appearance here. And that's what I got.
Steve Rogers, kind of. We
get Steve Rogers. We get Captain America without the helmet on. But those, and then there was some nice, like, Easter eggs, too, that will go in afterwards. But did I miss any cameos?
Doctor Strange.
Oh, yeah. I wrote that. Doctor Strange, too. No, that was easy to sneak by. Yeah.
That was a weird one, too, because, like, he was performing a surgery, but he was using his abilities, like, in front of a nurse. Like, maybe that was, like, the Rachel McAdams character, who I don't remember her name. Silver Samurai.
Yeah, I don't know that person.
That's just a Wolverine villain type.
Oh, he was in the Wolverine, a version of him.
God, don't ask me to say if it's. I think it's Wolverine, not Wolverine Origins. I think it's the Wolverine.
The Wolverine.
And then the Winter Guard, the Russian team of like mutants.
Yeah, I didn't get that either. And then finally,
Make it right.
obviously, post-credit, Apocalypse.
That's the big. That's the biggest one that we had.
And him holding the Gambit card on Genosha in present day, when you have the rest of the X-Men that are split up, Blue and so Scott and Jean in the very, very, very distant future, where they meet almost like a multiverse version of Nathan, who doesn't seem like he hasn't been infected by Mr. Sinister. And then another one, you have them, a group of the team going way back, Professor X and Magneto and a few others going very much in the past, the distant past. And I thought of Apocalypse immediately. When they went away, Ricky Flex, before we get to Apocalypse, and when they disappeared and they said, oh, the X-Men have been gone for 6 months. And then you have Forge with the board and like who's missing and things like that. It says like Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch are off planet. So it makes you think they might appear in season 2 somehow, in some way. But I want to know if your mind went here too. When they disappeared from that moment off Planet M, from those dwindling moments in the episode, for a moment, did you think that these characters were being transported to the world we saw at the post-credit scene of the Marvels?
Not for 1 second.
You didn't think like what we saw Beast and him recalling Professor X, and then Binary in that moment with Monica Rambeau. You didn't think for a moment like X-Men 97 is trying to connect with the live action MCU?
I didn't think that. No, I understand where your rationale, but no, I because this has already been greenlit for basically like infinite seasons. I just didn't think that way. I was thinking, nope, this is X-Men 97. This is just this universe. You know, this animated.
Where did you
series.
think they went immediately? Just didn't know.
Didn't know. I didn't know. Yeah, I honestly just had no idea.
So, Apocalypse, Age of Apocalypse seems like it's being teased. Haven't read the comic series. I heard it's complicated. That's pretty much all I know about it. But I would assume Gambit, the one that you said we were so set in stone and not seeing again, I assume he's going to be one of Apocalypse's 4 horsemen, from what I know from
yeah. That Apocalypse. I did say that. I did say that. As in the possible horsemen of death. I did say that earlier.
I have to look back in the archives. I don't remember.
I did, but I said if he came back as just Gambit, we'd have a big problem. Like, as in this world having no consequences. I think that would be a problem. But no, I think this is a huge, like, I think this is where like the episode really landed the plane, because I think, yes, this episode, action-packed, mixed with emotion, a lot of nostalgia. It pretty much like landed a lot of the storylines throughout the season, right? But then it also gets us excited for the next season, and it has already the big bad here introduced in season 1. Think about it. Bastion wasn't introduced until episode 6, end of episode 6. 6. And Mr. Sinister was episode 3, but like, was he the big bad? We were like thinking about it, but not really. No, but we got Apocalypse. We're teasing Gambit coming back. And Apocalypse, he's one of the world's first mutants, if not the first one, right? And X-Men, big bad. So huge. And I think it sets up an interesting storyline for season 2. And I just think that Gambit, I like being one of I still think the Genosha episode 5 is the best episode. I think this is like, I think for people that like me, that wasn't a huge Gambit guy, now I am. He's a great person to bring back and try to get that and like again, like with Rogue being such a standout in this season 2, that's going to be a great storyline in season 2 and throughout that season between him and Rogue, and also just him coming back, because now you have more people on board, not only with Gambit but with Rogue, and now with this series.
Yeah, teasing him as one of the 4 horsemen, that'd be like Rogue loves the bad boys. Rogue loves bad boys. I'm excited for it. I don't know much about it. I don't know who the other 3 horsemen would be, honestly. Maybe something that would harken back to the original series. We'll see.
Maybe doesn't need 4, maybe it's just 1.
It'd be cool if it was like somehow you had like Scarlet Witch, was like one of the 4 horsemen. That would be sick. I don't know what it was an Age of Apocalypse. I don't. Psylocke maybe brings up Psylocke back in here.
I do think it was cool too, though. Like besides that, like pre that, when you got Jean and Scott go into the future. You see a young Nathan.
But this is the past, right? Professor X and Magneto going to Egypt. To me, I was like, okay, that's on the same timeline. But somehow Jean and Scott Summers are not on the same timeline, but they're in the distant future.
Wait. I thought they were on the same timeline. Like if you're looking at the YouTube, this is the timeline, and they were here, present day. One went to here, back in time, and then one went to here in the future. So same timeline, just in different points.
But there's two different Nathans then?
No, I think that's Nathan just in the future.
No shot. Is he? He's not infected.
Then it's a different. Oh, right. So it's a different universe.
It's got to be a different universe.
A different universe. Yeah, you're right. I overlooked that. Yeah, so a different universe in the future.
Multiversal story.
Again, I'm thinking you could see if you're looking at the YouTube. I'm like trying to think this through. But I think that like the woman that was talking, that is a daughter of Scott and Jean, mother of Scotty in the comics. So that's why that would make sense. It would be a different universe.
Okay. We need an expert.
We need an expert. I'm not an X-Men expert, but I do know when they went into the past to ancient Egypt, that's Apocalypse.
Yes.
And Suburb Noir is Apocalypse.
I think that was totally intentional, obviously. Okay. Then you have the post-credit of Apocalypse in modern day, right? On Genosha.
So it connects.
I did want to, before we wrap, I just wanted to call out, I think low-key my favorite scene was the opening sequence with the bar during the Vietnam War, where it's Professor X and Magneto having the beer, and like you have Turn, Turn, Turn by the Byrds playing. Great song, and it makes you think it's a flashback sequence, but in reality it is Charles inside of Magneto's mind. I love that type of Charles, like taking someone inside their mind, much better than what we got with Charles's first episode when he takes everybody into the classroom. I hated that. I loved it here. It just seemed like the setting was amazing. I think of Forrest Gump every time I hear birds, turn, turn, turn. I just wanted to shout that out because I made a note about it. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring it up. But yeah, that's all I got for this episode.
Yeah, and that goes into along with like Magneto's arc, good in this season, and like these storylines were pretty much complete, or I liked them. Like there's a couple I didn't like the Jubilee Sunspot. I think it came around, but I didn't love that.
Looks like a beast now. Sunspot.
Yeah, that was good. This was a big come up for him. Big episode for Sunspot.
Terrible lines for him though. Terrible lines for him when he couldn't say "I love you" to Jubilee. I was just like, this is not good.
The Storm storyline I think was the worst, and then she suffered in this episode. She was not very good, and she's an Omega mutant. That makes no sense.
We forgot her. We forgot Storm.
She's the most powerful out of everyone besides Jean in the current X-Men group, and like she did nothing. Level mutant. It's crazy that she sucked.
Yeah. No, she didn't suck. It's just like I don't know why they just didn't have her recover. Like she just was gone. Like I was like, what is happening here?
Speaking of which, I have to bring this up because I'm guessing you didn't watch the 6 episodes that like Bo DeMayo recommended to watch. So one of them, crazy. So he recommended The Final Decision, which was a banger of an episode. It's the origin story of Mr. Sinister. Great episode. Highly recommend. Also has like Charles Xavier's like great grandfather or something. Grandfather maybe, whatever. And then there's a Sanctuary parts 1 and 2, which was about Magneto freeing mutants from the Genosha and bringing them to Asteroid M, which the finale had here. So that's where that connected. But then it also had One Man's Worth parts 1 and 2. And it was Professor X back at college in 1959 at Bard College. And it's the time when he knew he was a mutant, but he wanted to be a family physician. But they basically had to time travel back and save him for being assassinated to save a future mutant versus human wars and the demise of mutants. And
Days of Future Past almost.
Yes. And holy crap. In this episode, the people who go back in time, the main X-Men that go back in time are Logan and Storm. And Logan and Storm in these episodes in this timeline universe are married.
Oh, wow.
Don't remember that when I was a kid. Holy crap. They were married in these 2 episodes, and I was like, this is just so weird.
What an odd couple.
Yeah. But yeah, you said it was just because we had Storm. I wanted to make that reminder, and in case anyone else that watched this or didn't get to watch these recommended episodes, I do recommend them. I also I think they were really good.
Wolverine and Storm had their moments, but it just wasn't as consistent as some of the other characters. Bo DeMeo clearly wanted to show love to the full arsenal of characters because he wants to say like these are characters worth diving into and worth hearing their stories.